Jake Collins was the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence. He was in his mid-30s, with a chiseled face that hinted at years of discipline. A soldier through and through, Jake had served in the military for over a decade. He wasn't just any soldier. He was a decorated combat veteran, known for his loyalty and calm demeanor under pressure. Now retired, he worked as a security consultant while enjoying time with his best friend and fellow veteran, Mike Reynolds. Mike, a slightly older man with a warm smile and a booming laugh, was the perfect balance to Jake's quiet intensity. They had been through thick and thin together, and their bond was unshakable. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Jake and Mike were on a road trip to visit another former comrade. They were driving Jake's old but reliable pickup truck, with an American flag decal on the back window and a couple of MAGA hats tossed casually on the dashboard. They weren't wearing the hats at the moment, but they didn't think much about their presence in the truck. For Jake and Mike, the hats symbolized more than politics. They represented pride in their country, a country they had both risked their lives to protect. As they pulled into a gas station just off a quiet highway, the place seemed deserted, except for a few vehicles. Jake stepped out of the truck to fill the tank while Mike went inside to grab some snacks. Jake noticed a group of bikers parked nearby. There were about 6 of them, all dressed in leather jackets adorned with patches. Their motorcycles were loud and shiny, and their laughter carried across the parking lot. Jake paid them no mind, focusing instead on the rhythmic sound of the fuel pump. But the bikers noticed Jake. One of them, a burly man with a scruffy beard and a menacing grin, spotted the MAGA hats in the truck. He nudged his companions, and they all started chuckling and exchanging glances. Jake could feel their eyes on him, but he remained calm, pretending not to notice. When Mike returned from the store, carrying a bag of chips and a couple of sodas, the tension was palpable. "What's going on?" Mike asked quietly, handing Jake a soda. "Nothing I can't handle," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. Just as Jake finished pumping gas, the bikers made their move. They sauntered over, their heavy boots clunking against the pavement. The leader, the man with the scruffy beard, spoke first. "Nice hats you got there, fellas. Big fans, huh?" His tone was mocking, and his companions laughed. Mike glanced at Jake, who gave a barely perceptible nod. Jake's expression didn't change, but Mike knew what it meant. "Stay calm. Don't escalate." "We're just passing through," Jake said, his voice even. "Not looking for any trouble." "Trouble?" the leader said, feigning surprise. "Oh no, we're not looking for trouble either. Just thought we'd come over and have a little chat with some patriots." His words dripped with sarcasm. One of the bikers, a lanky guy with a snake tattoo on his neck, stepped closer to the truck. "Nice flag, too. Real classy." Jake and Mike stood their ground, their military training kicking in. They knew how to assess a situation and stay composed, even when outnumbered. "We'll be on our way," Jake said, stepping toward the driver's side door. But before he could open it, another biker blocked his path. "Not so fast," the leader said. "We're not done talking." Mike's voice cut through the tension. "You've had your fun. Let's not make this any worse than it has to be." The leader's grin faded. "Or what? You gonna call the cops? Or maybe you'll cry about it on your little social media?" The bikers laughed again, but the sound was hollow, forced. Jake took a deep breath. "We don't want any trouble, but if you don't step aside, you're gonna find out real quick what happens when you mess with the wrong guys." His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. The bikers hesitated. Something about Jake's tone made them uneasy. The leader scoffed, but his bravado was slipping. "Oh yeah, you in what army?" Mike smirked. "You're looking at it." Before the bikers could respond, Jake took another step forward. His movements were controlled, deliberate. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk away. Trust me, it's the smart move." The bikers exchanged uncertain glances. They might have had numbers on their side, but they were starting to sense they were outmatched in a different way. These weren't just 2 random guys at a gas station. Jake and Mike had an air of quiet authority, the kind that only comes from years of experience in situations far more dangerous than this. Finally, the leader muttered something under his breath and backed off. "Let's go," he said to his crew, trying to sound indifferent, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared away, Mike let out a low whistle. Well, that was fun. Jake shook his head. Some people just don't know when to quit. They got back in the truck and drove off, leaving the gas station behind. The encounter was over, but the lesson was clear. Never underestimate someone who's been through the fire and come out stronger. Jake and Mike weren't looking for trouble, but they were always ready to stand their ground when it came to protecting themselves and their principles. As they continued down the highway, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Jake glanced at Mike and said, "You think they'll think twice next time?" Mike chuckled. "Oh, I'm sure they will. They messed with the wrong soldiers today." The road ahead seemed calm and uneventful, but just as they rounded a bend, the distant wail of a siren caught their attention. Jake's eyes narrowed as he spotted flashing lights in his rearview mirror. "State troopers," he muttered. Mike frowned. "What now?" Jake slowed the truck and pulled over. Moments later, a patrol car came to a halt behind them, and an officer stepped out. But something about the way the officer moved put Jake on edge. His stride was too deliberate, his hand resting on his holster. Another patrol car pulled up alongside the first, and two more officers emerged. "This isn't a routine stop," Jake said under his breath. The first officer approached and tapped on the driver's side window. Jake rolled it down. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The officer's expression was hard to read. "We got a call about a disturbance at the gas station up the road. Mind stepping out of the vehicle?" Jake's gut told him something wasn't right, but he complied, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Mike followed suit, his eyes scanning the officers for any sign of hostility. As soon as they were out, the officer's tone shifted. "Hands where I can see them." Mike shot Jake a look. This is starting to feel like a setup. Before Jake could respond, one of the other officers spoke up. "We got a report that you two threatened some locals. Care to explain?" Jake's jaw tightened. "Threatened? We were the ones being harassed. We diffused the situation and left." The officer's lips curled into a smirk. "That's not the story we heard. Step back, both of you." Jake and Mike exchanged a glance. They knew better than to argue, but they also knew this wasn't going to be a fair fight. The bikers had called in a false report, twisting the story to make Jake and Mike look like the aggressors. "We're veterans," Mike said, his voice firm but respectful. "We know how to handle ourselves. Check the security footage from the gas station if you don't believe us." One of the officers hesitated, glancing at the others. The leader of the group seemed unconvinced. "We'll sort it out back at the station. For now, you're both coming with us." Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing. This wasn't just about clearing their names. It was about standing up for the truth. And if there was one thing Jake and Mike knew how to do, it was fight. Not with fists, but with integrity and resolve. As the officers moved to cuff them, Jake's eyes locked on Mike's. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Mike nodded. "Not by a long shot." Jake and Mike were escorted to the station in silence, but their minds were far from quiet. Both men had seen enough in their lives to know when they were being railroaded. As they sat in a cold, fluorescent-lit interrogation room, Jake leaned back in his chair, his calm demeanor unshaken. Mike, pacing the room, paused to glance at him. "You think they'll check the footage?" Mike asked, his voice low. Jake nodded. "If they're honest, they will. But if those bikers know someone in town, it might take more than that." Just then, the door opened and a young officer stepped in, his expression uncertain. "Gentlemen," he began, avoiding their eyes, "the footage from the gas station is being reviewed. Until then, you're staying here." Jake leaned forward, his gaze steady. "That's fine, but let me tell you something, officer. We didn't pick this fight. We ended it without violence. That footage will show you everything you need to know." The officer shifted on his feet. "We'll see," he muttered before leaving the room. Meanwhile, back at the gas station clerk, a middle-aged woman named Linda, had seen the entire altercation. After Jake and Mike left, she had noticed the bikers laughing among themselves and overheard them boasting about teaching those MAGA guys a lesson. Linda, tired of the biker's frequent antics, decided to review the security footage. What she saw confirmed her suspicions. Jake and Mike had done nothing wrong. Without hesitation, Linda called the state troopers to provide a witness statement. Hours passed before another officer entered the room, this one older and more authoritative. He placed a file on the table and sat down across from Jake and Mike. "Gentlemen," he began, "we owe you an apology. The footage from the gas station, combined with the clerk's statement, clears you of any wrongdoing." Mike let out a sigh of relief, while Jake's expression remained composed. "So, what happens now?" Jake asked. The officer leaned forward. "The bikers filed a false report, which is a criminal offense. We're bringing them in. But I have to ask, why didn't you press charges for harassment?" Jake exchanged a look with Mike before answering. "Because we've seen worse, and honestly, we didn't want to escalate a bad situation. All we wanted was to get on with our trip." The officer nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Well, you handled it better than most. We'll make sure this doesn't follow you any further." As Jake and Mike drove away from the station, the night sky was dotted with stars. The tension from earlier had faded, replaced by quiet reflection. Mike broke the silence. "You know, we could have avoided this if we just stayed quiet at the gas station." Jake shook his head. "Staying quiet wouldn't have changed who we are. We stood our ground, but we didn't cross the line. That's what matters." Mike nodded. "You think those bikers will learn anything from this?" Jake chuckled softly. "Probably not, but maybe someone else will. People need to see that standing up for yourself doesn't mean stooping to their level." The two friends drove on, the hum of the engine the only sound in the cab. They didn't need to say much more. Their actions had spoken loud and clear. Courage isn't about picking fights. It's about knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away. Jake and Mike showed that true strength lies in restraint and integrity. They reminded us that it's not just about being right. It's about doing what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Sometimes, the best way to teach a lesson is by letting the truth speak for itself. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.